Life's better when you're empty inside.
I'm super excited to talk with you today about mental health stigmas. I think that's a really important thing to talk about, and I'm glad that you're so open and willing. I feel like it can be a tricky topic to get people like on board with wanting to talk about. So it means a lot that you're down to be so open about it. But before we jump in, I kind of want to just give the listeners some context for how we know each other. So you guys know Audrey and I. Audrey is a very talented stylist, and we've worked together on several projects. The one that comes to mind for me, the biggest one, was New York Fashion Week, because you dressed me for like 20 or so events. It was so many. And I have this memory of you pulling a Wayne's World shirt off of a rack for like a nylon event. And I just thought it was so badass that you would pitch something like that. And immediately I was like, oh, she's got personality. She gets me. She knows kind of what my vibe is. And I just thought that was such a fun memory. But then on the darker side, that Fashion Week was during my kind of lowest point in my mental health history. I was really, really in the trenches of bulimia. It was really when I was struggling most with anxiety. And I wasn't open. I wasn't talking to anybody about it. I was really just closed off and struggling and white knuckling my way through every day. Mm-hmm. And I don't think sometimes we realize how much the people that we work with impact us. But I have memories of working with you and always feeling at ease, always feeling comfortable, always feeling there can be such like a tense air to a lot of Hollywood goings on, whatever you call them. Like whether it's a stylist meeting or a hair and makeup thing, there's just a lot of like pressure all the time. And I never felt that pressure with you. So I want to just thank you for sort of like cultivating an environment that felt so welcoming and at ease.
You are so welcome. Thank you for all those beautiful words. And yeah, I knew from the get-go there was something pretty special about you. Like I just vibed with you really quickly and I took it and ran. I wasn't afraid. And I thought outside the box as much as possible. And I mean, it hurts my heart to know that was at such a low point. As mental health, you can tell like you don't know when someone is struggling. It's so easy for it to just go unnoticed. I had no idea that was happening at the time, you know?
Yeah, isn't that wild? I don't know what it is. I'm really glad that the conversation is opening up a bit more and that people are, it seems like the world globally, people are willing to be more open with their mental health struggles. And I think that's so important because like you said, you just never know when somebody around you is struggling. And that's a really difficult. It's really difficult once you're aware of, oh my God, if they didn't know that I was struggling, I didn't know that person was struggling, and how many people around me are struggling all the time, and how are we going to get through this? So it's really great that the conversation is kind of opening up a bit more.
Yeah, and it is scary. I have to admit that the conversation, I am not coming at this where I feel more comfortable now, but beginning to talk about mental health, beginning to talk about treatment, I thought it was going to ruin me just because of how it's such a dark thing. Like you said earlier, it's dark. Nobody wants to really talk about it. It's hard to articulate the words a lot of times of how, because the emotions are so strong. It's so tough to like really put to words how you can feel when you're in the trenches like that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I was worried about being misconstrued. I was worried about, career-wise, just I thought people would get like upset of just like, oh, well, she's dealing with her stuff. Let's just like not work with Audrey right now. I thought that was going to happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was very intimidating to come out of treatment and decide to talk about it the way that I've been trying to, and to be a face and a voice to talk about these things openly.
Absolutely. I think it can be so daunting to think of I was really concerned about being perceived as weak or less than or not okay, where the reality was, no, when I wasn't talking about this was when I was not okay. Now that I'm talking about this, I'm golden, guys. I'm good to go. Yeah. I was in the trenches a few years ago when I was burying all that shit under a rug. Yeah. But I think that's just a difficult thing for people to understand, maybe if they're not so comfortable with mental health, with talking about mental health themselves.
And
go ahead.
Sorry, you sort of cling to that like it being your own little dirty secret. Again, with the articulation, it's a little tough, but I think you understand what I'm saying of like, it is this secretive thing that you kind of hold your cards, close to your chest when you are dealing with depression and eating disorders and anything that's, mental health wise. There's a bit of this, dirty secretiveness to it that you want to keep it quiet. You want to like almost wallow in it a little bit. At least I found that for myself,
Absolutely. I was also scared of coming out. I initially spoke about my history with eating disorders, and I was really worried about coming out with this secret, because then I thought this is a dark, vulnerable thought that I haven't shared before, but I was like, well, that means I can't go back. That means if I ever wanted to go back, I can't, because now I'm speaking about not having this, and I'm trying to advocate for not having this to others. And if there was a little grain of an eating disorder voice left in my mind, that eating disorder voice was going, well, you don't have me anymore. You can never come back to me once you do this. Are you sure you want to do that? That little bitch of a voice.
It's so crazy. There's something about when it comes to trauma that it kept us, my behavior at the time dealing with trauma, it kept me safe. The behaviors that I developed, at least I thought that it did at the time. I thought that it was a security blanket. I thought that I was doing things to cope at the time. And so it's a hard tearing away that happens when you decide to move forward. You just get so used to feeling terrible that it becomes the norm. It becomes the usual. And there is this sort of breakup that you have to go through with the darkness of it all. You have to go through a breakup period, and it's so weird that that's how it is, but it really is what it was like for me.
No, I think that's a perfect depiction. Can you give the listeners kind of a rundown of your mental health history leading up to now, why you're so passionate about talking about it today?
Of course. So I have always kind of struggled with mental health since about the age of 15. I moved around a lot when I was younger. My dad is in the Fortune 500 world. And because of that, he'd be VP or president or CEO of various telecom companies. And that meant moving all of the time. And so around 15, I couldn't tell you what number move it was, but it had been a lot at that point. And I was struggling with having to start over again. I just had to keep doing that. And so that was my first time going to therapy at my parents' suggestion, actually. They just could see that Audrey was not existing in the way that they knew me to be. And so that was my first foray into therapy. I have to admit, I didn't utilize it. I would sit in sessions and be silent the whole time. It got to the point, I was a minor at the time. And so my mother actually had to sit in on one of my appointments because the therapist was just like, she won't talk. She just sits here for the full hour. So I was very defiant that first stint at therapy. Went to college, didn't have any therapy during that time frame. And then when I moved out here to LA about 12 years ago, that was another move. I guess moving sort of triggered things in me to start doing things like I had a bout with bulimia when I was in high school, and it carried on with me until my late 20s. And so I would have, I guess, flare-ups is what you would call it. And so I would have these flare-ups when I would move or when something big was happening in my life. And so I did go to therapy again in my mid-20s, and that was of my own. I wanted to. And so it was a whole different world that time because I actually wanted to be there. I wanted the help. And then when I got into my early 30s with styling, it was going really great. And I had just the floor dropped from underneath me when this happened. But one of my clients, she's a singer. Her name's Christina Grimmie. She was murdered in Florida the evening before the whole Pace nightclub massacre happened. She passed away, and it was, my heart was ripped out. I went into freeze mode. I did not know how to deal with something like that. And I didn't go to therapy. I went to bed is what I did. I actually just took to my bed, and I'd say for a month, I just was in bed. I don't remember a lot of time during that period. I guess what some of my therapists have said is that during big bouts of trauma like that, your memory, it's like your body is so overstimulated and in overload mode that it's not making memories because that's like too much for your body. So it's not uncommon that you would experience big chunks of time that you were just like, I have no idea what I was doing during that time. The years afterward, because it's been 4 years now, I just didn't realize how much it hurt me and how much it traumatized me. And within that time frame, also my younger brother passed away from complications of diabetes. He was 28 years old when that happened.
Oh my God.
And the boom of like those two deaths, one after the other, it just, something in me fractured. I could almost physically feel something snap in me.
Wow.
And I still didn't go to therapy. I thought that with, I started abusing alcohol. It started to be just where like, I'd take just like a shot before I'd have a fitting or something. And I'd be like, okay, I'm going to be all right. Or I would take, I would abuse Benadryl even, because Benadryl kind of makes you loopy. I would do things to have escapism so that I could get through going through the motions of stuff. Because that's all I was doing. I was going through the motions. Where therapy came into my life a third time is, not to get too dark, but I had a suicide attempt where I had a belt around my neck is how close I got to doing something. And I tell people that because people have to know how serious this is. I don't want to gloss over, I just had a little attempt. It's like, no, I was ready to end things. And the thing was, I knew I didn't want to die. I knew I didn't want to die, but I didn't know how I wanted to live anymore.
Wow.
I really I had given up at that point. I was like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do life. I don't know how to get up. I don't know how to be me. I don't know where me went. And I called the National Suicide Hotline, the first time I've ever done that. And I believe that phone call saved my life. The next day, calling my parents to ask them what they recommend for me getting help saved my life. Within a matter of about 2 weeks of that attempt, I was in Arizona at a treatment facility for something like 45 days. And it completely saved my life.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing and for not glossing over. I think, I certainly appreciate the honesty, and just from knowing our listeners too, they definitely appreciate that. They're not interested in just, the cavalier version.
Yeah. And it's tough to say that. I don't know that my parents even know that it got that bad. They know that things were bad, but with them listening to this will be the first time a lot of people have heard that that's how close that I got to ending things.
I'd love to kind of go more into depth with these 3 bouts of therapy that you had. With that, it's really interesting to me that your parents introduced the concept. I think that's really forward thinking and admirable of them. Yeah. I was I lived in a family and had this upbringing that was very like denying of mental health. My mom had, Lord knows the amount of mental health issues she had, and just refused to get help despite how damaging her mental health issues were to our entire family. Despite my father, my grandfather begging her to get help, she just would not do it. And that sort of conditioning is I just think so unhealthy to grow up in. So it's really great that they introduced it. Can you walk me through why you think you were so resistant? Because I have some philosophies on that from my own point of view, but I'm curious to hear from you.
I guess like any teenager, maybe it's cliche, I thought I knew best. I thought I knew how to deal with it. And I thought that keeping things closed off was the safest way for me to get by. I felt like with revealing anything, with letting anyone in, vulnerability was terrifying to me. And because it scared me, that meant that it was bad.
Right. Exactly. I very much, I don't think anyone directly said to me like, hey, you need help because of my upbringing, because that was not a thing that we admitted. And also I grew up Mormon, which is also, no, you don't need help. You need God, and you need to look. And, I think that religion can be great and very helpful for some people on their journeys. It was not for me. It was a hindrance, I think. But But if somebody had said to me, oh, you need help at various phases in my life, I would have been like, fuck off. What are you talking about? Like, you're a fucking loser. I don't need help. No, thank you. But it was also, because I was so blocked off from my actual self, from who I actually was, what I actually needed, what my actual struggles were. And it can be really daunting to come face to face with yourself when you've been shutting yourself out, whether it be with substances or whatever it might be, for so long. It can be so fucking intimidating.
Yeah. And how you said losers. Oh my gosh. Like, I was in a outpatient program for eating disorders with youth at the Stanford Medical Center. My parents also thought that I should go to that. And again, I sat in these meetings and I called people names in my head. I was just like, not like you guys. I did everything in my head that I could to distance and other myself from this group of people that were doing the same thing that I was. But I was just like, no, I'm not that bad. I've got this under control. You guys don't have it under control. Like, I'm going to leave here and I'm just going to continue doing this. But you guys are going to have to like stay here for like, I made sure that I distanced myself so much. So it's just, when you said losers, I was like, oh gosh, I know that complex of just like feeling like, I'm better and above this, you know?
Right. Absolutely. So then with the second time you went into therapy, that was your own choice.
Yeah.
And why do you think it didn't stick, or did it not? Did you get what you needed and then left?
Things started to get too real. That is so easy for me to identify why that stint didn't work, is that things started to penetrate the core and the center of what was actually happening to me. And yet again, I ran away from it. The truth of things, it scared me so much that it's almost this thing, because what happened, after I had Christina pass away, I would be afraid to cry. I would be afraid to cry because I was like, I'm never going to stop crying.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my God. It's such a real fear. You go, it'll just take me over. I'll never stop crying.
That's the thing, is I was like, if I let this therapist in, I'm going to die, because I'm not going to be able to breathe. I'm going to cry myself to death. I truly believe that. I know it sounds so silly probably, but the fear is really there that like you will not be able to control your bodily like functions if you delve into things that are that deep. It's terrifying. And so I fled is what I did. When it comes to fight or flight, I am very much a flight person.
Absolutely. I mean, I still have probably, usually around my time of the month, I have a really intense cry fest. And even still, even though it's so much less than it used to be, I still feel like when that wave comes over me and it's so intense, I'm like, I won't see tomorrow. I can't function anymore. And it's so difficult if you're a person who has bigger emotions and I think, sidebar, I think like everybody has big emotions, but it's just your level of suppression that makes you maybe not think but it can just feel so overwhelming and so scary. Like you'll never be able to escape. You'll never be able to claw out of it. That was certainly my own experience as well with therapy, of like, once I open this can of worms, I can't get that lid back on. Like I'm scared of my emotions. I'm scared of what I actually think and feel about things. And I don't want to face that shit. So maybe I will just return to that bottle of whiskey. Maybe I will just return to my eating disorders, because those actually are kind of easier than recovery, because recovery means facing myself. And those mean, even though I'm destroying myself, I can at least avoid myself. It's a really fucked up way of thinking, but that's exactly where I was at.
No, that's totally how it is that it's avoidance, and the avoidance, it makes you feel like you've got some sort of a superpower. You're just like, okay, this disease that I've got, this is my armor that I have. This is what protects me. And it's literally killing you at the time, but that's sort of what it feels like, is that, no, this is a good thing. Let me cling to this, because the other option is far too scary for me to even like delve into. So I'll just take this tragic way that I'm like living and operating. I'll take that over the reality of the matter and getting to the root of the problem.
Right. Oh my God. So the first time you went to an actual treatment center that was Sierra Tucson?
Yeah, I went to Sierra Tucson, and that was last year. I mean, it's wild talking about this because like it feels not that long ago. I mean, I feel like I was just there a few months ago, but it was in May of last year is when I went. And like I said, I was there about 45 days. And I mean, do you want to hear about like how that was?
Oh yeah.
Upon first getting in, it was really traumatic because almost immediately after you go through your questionnaire that you have with the nurse, you are in a medical gown getting a skin abrasion test. And I didn't understand what that was for. Because I'm there with addicts, it's to see, like, do you have marks from needles, like track marks and stuff?
Wow.
So I was getting assessed. They're taking a lot of blood and urine samples. It's very, very medical when you first get into treatment. So I would kind of warn people that is going to happen. It's not just going to be this like, hey, like wear a name tag and like kind of go off and do your thing.
Finger paint. Yeah.
Yeah, you're getting poked and prodded quite a bit in the beginning. And I thought, as much as I say that saved my life at the beginning, I wanted to run again. I called my mom that evening, desperately asking to leave. I was like, I think I've made a mistake. I don't need to be here. I'm not like these people. I kept doing that thing of avoiding because it was scary. I mean, you're there with drug addicts, alcoholics, suicidal people, like everything that you can think of that has to do with substance abuse and mental health issues. You are seeing it, and you're seeing you're not meeting people the way that they really are, which is also another daunting thing. You're meeting people at the lowest points of their lives. So that was also difficult because I'm introducing myself, but I'm like, you're not meeting Audrey. Like, I don't even really want to introduce you to me because this isn't me that you're seeing. Like, I don't know what this shell is, but I guess I'll, tell you about my life a little bit. But that was very, that's really raw, meeting people that way, right from the get-go, meeting people who are in the trenches with you like that. It's very revealing. It's very it's like an open wound, and you're having to deal with it because you're in treatment. It's all the time that you're dealing with it. You wake up and you have to deal with it. You are eating your food and you have to deal with it because they had a group of people for the eating disorders that you had to, they had to look at your tray and make sure that you were like getting enough food. And for me, I was recommended a nutritionist while I was there to make sure that I was getting enough. Because I was freaking out, I went back into bulimic habits. And so I went there, I had a slew of things going on. I was there for trauma, substance abuse of alcohol, PTSD, anxiety, depression, and a lot of these I didn't know I had. PTSD, I thought you had to go to war to have that. I thought you had to be like a fireman to have PTSD.
Right.
That's not the case at all. Because of what happened with Christina, they were like, this is textbook PTSD. It's secondary, but like you had a traumatic experience in her being murdered and you're dealing with trauma. We have to like get to the root of that. But yeah, being in treatment, the first couple of weeks for me anyways, I was just going through the motions because part of me was a bit disappointed in myself that I even had to be there. I had to get over that disappointment of like, this is what I was saying to myself was like, how did you get here? How did things get this bad that you had to up and leave from your home in LA and you have to live in this facility because you don't know how to live anymore? And that was a challenge to figure out why and how things had gotten that bad. But it was very easy once I had the help of my team. There were just so many things that I had bottled up for so long that it was just a hurricane going on inside of me. It was almost, once I started to open up, I was like, well, of course I was going to spin out of control at some point. Like, no person can keep all of these secrets inside and not have it eventually spill over in some way. Like, I thought I was doing a pretty good job of managing it. I had a lot of people who were very, very shocked when I said I was going to treatment, because again, they had no idea I was hiding it well. I actually was giving myself a great pat on the back because I thought I was doing so awesome with hiding it. And I really wasn't. I mean, once I got to treatment, my health was in such poor condition. I had low blood count. I had anemia. I wasn't healthy. And I was so shocked to hear that, because again, I thought I was a poster child for like, this is how you deal with depression. And that poster child part of it very much got ripped down when I went there and was like, you don't have anything together. You were barely holding on to anything.
Yes. Well, I think it's so insightful of you to bring attention to what happens when you first become kind of aware of the realities of your situation. I had that too, where I became so disappointed in myself and felt like such a failure, and it can be very complex to try and figure out, where did things start going wrong? Like, do you ever have this happen where it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? For me, it was like, was it the trauma and then the substance abuse? Was it the anxiety first and then the trauma? Was it the trauma, then the anxiety? Like, trying to assess whether, substance abuse preceded mental health issues or vice versa, or what is an attempt to quell the other thing. Like, it feels like a math equation to figure out, like, where do I start with what is wrong with me to figure out how I can even get on the path to making things right. Did you have that experience as well, where it was like, what came first?
Yeah, I felt that it was really difficult we're smart people, you and I know that we are. And we were doing things to ourselves, though it didn't make sense. I was literally every day doing things to actively kill myself, telling myself that, no, this is coping, this is dealing, this is you living your life. And I had to get right with that train of thought of like, how did I get to a point that I thought drinking all throughout the day, because it was 24 hours a day that I'd be drinking. Time meant nothing to me. Like, it did not matter if it was 7 a.m. and I was waking up and I was like, you know what, to get the day going, let's have a shot of vodka. That meant nothing to me. I had to figure out, when did I throw the cards up like that and give up in that way of just like letting this control me in that way. And it's when, I guess that was me spiraling. It's hard to articulate like the why of it. It's so hard to get to that why, but that was something I struggled with, was kind of feeling dumb of just like, why are you doing this? Like, why are you doing this to yourself? What in your head or mind made you think that this was what was going to help you out? Like, you went through the DARE program when you were a kid. Like, it's, that this isn't helping you. But I clung to the fact that those vices and those habits that I had developed, no matter how bad or unsafe they were, I was convinced that that's what was keeping me alive. That was keeping me safe.
Right. Did you lose any friends in your process of getting help?
I did. I lost both friends and clients, and that was part of what was so terrifying for me anyways, because I'm self-made. I don't have parents that are like in the industry or anything. So I came up on my own in this industry, and I felt like I was throwing a grenade into my life. I was just like, this is going to cause a ripple effect. And there's going to be people that aren't going to be able to go on this journey with me, that it's going to be too much. They maybe don't know what to say. To be honest, on the friend front, my friends saved me, because even though I was completely isolating by the time that I made that call to the suicide hotline, I still would get texts. I would get emails from people. I had this lovely close group of friends that they never gave up on me. And that group of people, I've let them know at this point, I mean, they saved me. Them doing that saved me so much. So I was very fortunate that I didn't lose friends, but I did lose clients. And that was a hard pill to swallow, because I didn't really get an answer as to why, but I had to make peace with that was just kind of the natural order of things, that like, that's a possibility that's going to happen. They're going to have to move on from you for X, Y, or Z. And I had to make sure to not cling to that too much and make that yet another thing, bringing me down. But yeah, my friends, they pulled through in such an amazing way. And I'm just so thankful for them because, like I said, they never gave up, even though I made it extremely hard to get in touch with me.
Oh, it's incredible. It's so nice to have that kind of support.
Yeah.
I definitely have heard of people losing friends because of maybe their mental health journey being too difficult, that friends just kind of, or, maybe their friends aren't in the same place with accepting their own mental health issues. So it just seems weird, or like, oh, I don't want to get near that. That seems scary, or whatever it might be. For me, I actually had the process of also having to distance myself from friends, because I had some friends who had eating disorders. And a big part of recovery is, guess what? You can't see anybody who also has an eating disorder, because that's going to be really, really triggering for you. And you're so much more likely to succumb to your eating disorder behaviors if you're around somebody else who has one. So it was like, well, okay, guess I just lost half my friends, because half my friends are fucking actresses. And guess what? If there's one occupation where people have eating disorders, it's acting. Like, it's just so common and such a part of like the business. And it's so conditioned by people just patting you on the back and, admiring your thinness. It's like, so it's so messed up and so disturbed, but it was a difficult reality for me to come to terms with, that, okay, to get better, I'm going to have to actually distance myself from some people that I love, that I'm really close with, because they're not ready or willing or wanting to get better right now. And I hoped that maybe they would, or, but it just didn't necessarily happen.
Yeah, there weren't people that had to go, but there were actions and activities that had to go. My social life looked completely different post-treatment. I had to be very careful of where I went. And as you know, this industry, alcohol flows like water. So I had to stop going to events for a little while. I knew that I could build up a resilience where I could go, but initially when you're getting out of treatment, you can't be at least for me, I couldn't be at those things. I work with musicians. That was really, really tricky, working with the musicians and staying away from alcohol, not having even just like the smell of it kind of trigger you a little bit. Like, I had to re-navigate and reassess, what my social life looks very, very different post-treatment, like a really, really different.
Oh man, I totally get that. It changes completely. I used to be like out on the town all the time. And I mean, now I haven't left my house for a month because of COVID, but before then I'm just, now I'm just such a homebody, which I actually always have been. I was only going out to get wasted, to lose myself, to forget about myself.
Yep.
So this Sierra Tucson, this was the 45-day experience. How did you go from being on day one, calling your mom and being like, oh no, I made a mistake, to then day 45, presumably on the other side of that?
I let go of the control that I so desperately was clinging to.
How'd you do it? I still struggle with that.
I had to hit what was my rock bottom, and my rock bottom was not knowing myself, waking up and truly, I had a moment where, and I can remember this so vividly, I looked in the mirror and I was like, I don't know who that person is. Mm-hmm. I genuinely, like, nothing, the twinkle in my eye, like, is not there. I don't know who I am anymore, and I don't know what I want, and I don't know how to be happy. And even just more than happy, I don't know how to be content, because that's all I was looking for. I wasn't looking to leave there just overly like jubilant, but I wanted to be content, because that wasn't even happening in my life. And so what I said is, my way doesn't work. That is a theme, and that is a mantra that I held on to all of it. Anytime I would question what was going on, anytime I started to think that I knew best, I kept saying to myself, your way doesn't work, because your way is what led you to all of this. And so I gave over everything. I guess the way that like religiously people give themselves to God, I gave myself over to my treatment team. And I just said, these people they are not here to hurt you. They are medically equipped to deal with what's going on. And I had to give trust in that that I had never done that before, but it was just so apparent. I was like, my life depends on this. If I don't do this, I really was not sure that I would leave treatment and be able to live. And that definitely was my mantra. It was just, your way doesn't work. Wow.
It was sort of similar with me and with my history. I first went into therapy to focus on eating disorders, and then kind of it's sort of, you have to focus on one thing. I feel like with a situation like mine, where it was like, well, there's eating disorders, there's alcohol issues, there's anxiety. Where are we going to start?
Yeah.
And then there's trauma, there's grief of my mother's passing, and all this shit. And I initially thought like starting with the mom grief made the most sense, but then kind of realized, no, the eating disorder had to be focused on first. Because if I am not living in a sustainable way, if I don't have the eating disorder and the alcohol under control, how can I even address the mom stuff? Especially if I don't have the eating disorder under control, because that was such a warped way of thinking that if I was processing my mom's death through the lens of my eating disorder, that would have been a completely different processing experience than post-eating disorder.
Yeah.
And recognizing that was a real turning point for me, where it was like, okay, I have to get rid of this thing, even though I'm not fully ready to get rid of this thing. Because at the point when I first entered recovery from my eating disorder, I still was clinging to the fact that I thought it was helping me in some way. Mm-hmm. And there was this part of me deep down that knew it wasn't, that knew there was that little small voice inside me that knew, no, the part of you that thinks this thing is helping you is wrong. And it has been wrong for a while, and you need to seek help. And finding that little small voice and following that small voice's kind of whisperings was really one of the main things that kind of got me into recovery and to maintain recovery despite how difficult it can be. Yeah. I want to talk to you a little bit about, so Camden Center, did you go here after Sierra Tucson, or was this kind of in tandem? How did that work?
Camden Center was my outpatient place that I went to, and that is recommended. If you go to treatment, any and everyone that's almost part of your graduation, you will be recommended. If you choose to go, that's of your own device. But for me, I was recommended to go to Camden Center, which is a facility that it's twofold. It's outpatient, meaning that you don't have to live there. You go and visit every day, but they do have a house. It's called the Beverly House, and they have two houses. There's a men's house and there's a women's house, and there is the option to live there. I chose to live in the women's house because it's a sober environment. It's, I hate the word now because I heard it so much during treatment, but it's reintegration is what it is. After being in treatment, even if you do, I stayed longer for 45 days. Normally the treatment program is about 30 for most people. Going through that, you have been segregated from quote unquote real life for so long, and you have been in an environment. It's so healthy and refreshing, but it's unfortunately not a reflection of the real world, all the like positive enforcement that you're getting in treatment. To get kind of like spit back out into the real world. It was crazy walking through the airport being like, if I wanted to, I could go to that bar right now and get a drink, because that was what I did to fly. I don't really love to fly. And that was sort of my medicine that I would take, is I would have some sort of a cocktail. That was kind of terrifying, of just like, oh my gosh, I've just been in this treatment facility. I've been watched and monitored. I literally had a tracking device on me, and now I'm just set out into the wild and I can do what I want. For some people, that's not safe. And I didn't think it was safe for me because, I was worried that I needed a little bit more hand-holding is what I would call it. But I needed that hand-holding in order to be able to come home. And come home to my house in LA. Like I just wasn't ready for that. So I did the sober house. I lived there for about 3 months. And it's wild because like I started going back to work, and it's a balancing act. I chose not to tell a whole lot of people that that's where I was living. It was a little difficult to balance that out, but Camden Center is basically a place. it is a group of many therapists, and it's almost like school because like you go, you have a schedule, you have courses and sessions. Some of them are one-on-one, others are group. And then it also has holistic undertones where they do massage therapy. There's a lot of stuff that they do with craniosacral, which is massaging of like different pressure points in your head. I love that. That's really so it's a mixture of the two of those. And I mean, I did that for about 10 months, the program in general. So 3 months I lived at the sober house, got out of there, but I stayed at Camden Center, and I did that for 10 months. And I mean, I still go to groups that are there. Like this evening, I'm going to be going to, there's an alumni group for Sierra Tucson. I go to that every single Wednesday. So there's still things. Yeah. Like this weekend, they have a virtual like retreat that they're doing for Sierra Tucson. So I'm still really actively involved in my aftercare, even though I'm not at Camden Center anymore.
Right. So is sober living, was that exclusively for that house that you lived at in Camden, or is that a sort of lifestyle that you implement even after leaving Camden?
That was sort of you implement it like while you're there at Camden. It's sort of part of the process. And how do I describe living and sober living? It's a bit like college living again. For those that have gone to college, for me, like, I'm used to a big bed. You're back in like a double, and it's kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm 30 years old and I'm sleeping in a double. Like, how did this happen? But it's a normal house. It's a house that you live in where they are cooking your meals for you, and they're very like health conscious. So they're trying to help you like nutritionally to get back on track and not have that slip up. So we had a chef. You had to do breathalyzers every time you would leave. Like, even if you were just going to Camden Center, anytime you left the vicinity of the house, when you came back, your bags were searched and you had to do a breathalyzer. Mm-hmm. And weekly, we would have urine tests that we had to take either at Camden Center or at the house. But you were always taking urine samples because when you're at a place like Camden Center, it's everyone is sober. So even if it's marijuana, anything like that, medicinal, like they don't want you taking anything. Mm-hmm. So they're checking to make sure that all of us are like nice and healthy and sober. There's curfew. When you first get there, it is very, very controlled. You don't get to go anywhere. And that's just for the first 48 hours because they just really want to make sure that like you are a threat to run. Because that does happen with people, that they have that flight instinct. Things like you can't have your car in the beginning. Just they want to make sure that you're really there and present with reintegration. But afterward, it gets easier. You know, I got to bring my car with me. Curfew was 11 p.m. As long as you tell them where you're going, you don't really have to have anyone go with you. But I will say real quick, I went to an event with a client, and I went with a sober companion, and it was interesting. I went with a longtime client that I knew wouldn't judge about this. She knew that I had gone to treatment. I had been really transparent with her. So I was able to tell her like, hey, I'm going to go to this event, but there's going to be this person with me who is trailing us. She's making sure that I stay sober at this event. And yeah, we're going to have a great time. And it was a little hard. When I went to get a drink, like, she was right next to me to make sure that I got something that was not alcoholic. But that was maybe the weirdest thing, was like the sober companion. Sure. But yeah, I loved living in that house. Like, it helped me so much to be able to just like delve back into day-to-day life and get used to being in the real world, but being in the real world sober.
I totally get the sober companion thing. I took a therapist to the Teen Choice Awards, and it was so that I wouldn't, so that I wouldn't purge, because I get really socially anxious. And I think the worst thing for somebody with social anxiety is, maybe an award show where there's like hundreds of people there and bright lights and teleprompters. And it's just like, it's overly stimulating, I think. And I was it was right at the very early stage of my recovery, and I did not trust myself to be able to go to an event and not purge. I just knew that was a huge, maybe I could get through an afternoon on my own in my own place if I have everything, my environment completely controlled. If I'm thrown into the Teen Choice Award, it's not happening. Like, I'm purging. So I brought this therapist along, and she was really helpful, and also very excited to meet Adam Sandler, who she met backstage. She was thrilled. Laura loved it.
Only time you did that, or did you have a companion come to other things with you?
That was the only time, although I had, with the type of therapy that I swear by called DBT, you have these things, you have access to coach calls which is where if you're feeling really intense emotions, or you're feeling really susceptible to, say, binging and purging, if that's one of your triggers, or alcohol, if that's one of your triggers, you can then reach out to your coach, and they have certain hours that they are completely accessible and able to help you, which was an instrumental part of the DBT program and why that worked so well for me. And I was utilizing those calls constantly when I was working on the second season of a Netflix show in Canada. And I was on that phone constantly, because it was, again, acting was very much a thing that was a huge trigger for me, and being on camera and being in that environment. And for me, acting really felt like so little. It felt like the occupation where there's the least amount of control. And my personality was just yearning for some amount of control, because so much of my life was out of control. It was a recipe for disaster. So I think those coach calls were super helpful.
Yeah.
I would love to go, if you can talk a little bit more about like mental health stigmas, and some mental health stigmas that caused some resistance for you, if you had any judgments toward mental health, and then how you overcame those.
I think that in general, in the Black community, there is this stigma of deal with it. I think it comes from, like, we're supposed to overcome. It's this thing of like, overcome, triumph, keep it quiet, keep it in your family. So there's that component. And I think some of that originates even from slavery, is just of the grin and bear it kind of thing, and just like overcoming it versus dealing with what's happening. I didn't have that in my family necessarily, but I see it in the community. And so up until my parents recommended therapy when I was 15, it was a taboo thing. Therapy was for schizophrenics. That was for, at least those were my judgments. Right. That was for, quote unquote, the crazy people. I thought it was a bad thing. I thought therapy was punishment if you had to go, that like things were bad for you. You were acting out in a way that needed to be like fixed. So that was kind of what I looked at therapy as. Like, I definitely felt that it was punishment for me when I first went. Like, I felt like I had done something wrong. I didn't want to be there, was forced to be there. Like, it was just all very negative, but that was because of some of my bias coming into it. So I guess I did. I had some stipulation going into therapy that it was a bad thing.
And then was it your mid-20s when you went to a therapist? Okay. At that point, were you still kind of battling with like, fuck, but I don't want to be this, whatever the judgment might be? Or do you think you were kind of past them at that point?
I was just starting to get so miserable that I was like, which is the lesser evil? And so I kind of, I went with that, is that I was just like, I don't like how I'm living my life. So it was easier in my 20s to decide to go to therapy. At that point, therapy, it wasn't as taboo as it was when I was 15. Because when I was 15, that was back in 2001. So I mean, that was a while ago. And I think that just in general, this conversation that the world is now having with mental health was not happening. Like, it wasn't.
God. No, it was nowhere near happening. It was so,
it's still it was closeted. Again, you keep it in your family. Try to just keep it within immediate family. It's very hush hush. And so going to therapy, it's my friends were going too. And I think that helped too, having friends be in therapy and being open and talking about it. I was like, okay, like this isn't such a like taboo thing anymore. I don't have to act like this is such a like bad thing to go to therapy.
100%. I think it can be so helpful if you have the influence of friends around you who are working on themselves and normalizing it. It makes it so much less. If you're like the first of the friend group to do it, woof, that's daunting.
Yeah.
Do you have any of the judgments around, because I had these judgments around myself with eating disorders. I was like, well, I'm not shallow. Eating disorder means that I'm shallow. I don't want to be shallow. I want to have more substance than that. I want to have, and also I don't want to be weak. People who have eating disorders are weak. They can't cope. They can't deal with their problems. I don't want to be that. Then I also had, I'm too cool for eating disorders. Eating disorders were like lamos who were in the corner just like talking about calories. I'm too cool for that. I don't want to have that. All those judgments were ultimately just forms of denial and excuses for me to continue in my behavior. I see that now, but they were very, very real for me at the time. Did you have any of those judgments around your eating disorders?
Yeah, my eating disorder, again, I looked at it as medicine. I thought that was what was helping me. Taking laxatives and having my stomach to the point that it was just in knots, where I literally sometimes couldn't go to school because I had taken so many that it was just like, that's not happening going to school today.
I know that exact feeling.
Yep. I thought that punishment was good because that meant that I was doing a good job at being bulimic, because it was like the more that I hurt, the less that I weighed, the smaller that clothes were getting. Those were all, for me, it was like misguided, but it was positive reinforcement that I was doing something right. And what I did with my eating disorder, it was just, I guess medicine is how I looked at it. I thought that I was like nurturing myself to keep things in control. So much of mine, initially it started out as a weight thing, and then it delved into being a control thing. It was completely because I had lost control in my life and I had something to control. It was, I hate to say it this way, but like, I thought it was amazing at the time that I was like, I can eat whatever I want and there is no consequence because I'm just going to purge this afterward. It almost felt like I was invincible.
Yeah.
I hate saying it that way, but you're like nodding your head and like,
I get
it too. But like, yeah, you feel kind of invincible that you're just like, I can do anything because I don't eat, or if I do eat, it doesn't have to stay in my system. And like, all the tricks of the trade to like get it out. And I felt a bit invincible at the time.
I'm glad that you bring awareness to the misguided but positive reinforcement, because I feel like sometimes in recovery, people shy away from talking about the highs of eating disorders, but they are important to talk about because nobody would be struggling with an eating disorder if they weren't feeling that. Like if everyone recognized in those moments when they had those urges, what self-destruction they were doing to themselves, nobody would be struggling. We've got to talk about both sides of the coin and bring light to the highs so that we can hopefully, get the conversation out there, get the word out there, bring awareness to that side of things so that people don't continue to struggle. I mean, I would love a world where people aren't dealing with eating disorders, but it's not going to get there by us just avoiding half of the conversation and pretending like there wasn't any misguided positive reinforcement along the way.
That's so true. I didn't think about it that way, but a lot of people focus on the negative of getting rid of the disorder instead of, like you said, talking about there is a euphorism to having an eating disorder. Every time after I purged, I would be so happy. There was this just like, I was elated. I felt accomplished. I felt like I had done something good. It was short-lived. It never lasted very long. But, just in the very right aftermath of it, I was on a high. I was like, this is great. I got exactly what I needed out of this, which is some positivity. Let's go on to the next binge, Oh
my God, 100%. I totally get it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
As bad as that is, I still get it. All right. Well, I want to be mindful of your time here. If you don't mind, I've just got a couple wrap-up questions and then we'll let you go.
All
right. So Do you have any sort of mental health like maintenance tools that you incorporate now? What are those? What does that look like? However basic it might be or not basic?
I go to AA meetings. They're a little different now in COVID times because they are via Zoom. So I've never been to a meeting before in person, but I go to Zoom meetings. They have them daily, which is amazing. I go to a 5:30, and then I also have a backup 7 p.m. if I'm having a really hard day. I'll do back-to-back ones. So I do those. I do my Sierra Tucson alumni meetings every Wednesday. I speak with my therapist from Camden Center. Luckily, I was able to leave Camden Center, but still work with the same therapist. So I talk with her 1 to 2 times a week. And then I also have a psychiatrist at, it's an institute called the Bowman Center. And that's where my psychiatrist is the one who's able to prescribe medicine, and we go through my regimen. We literally just had a Zoom session last week where we were kind of fiddling with some of my meds. And so that's my regimen. Is I've got a pretty, it's big and expansive, but like I have to have those things so that when I have any triggers or flare-ups happen, I have all these multiple either meetings or individuals that I can go to immediately. What's great with my therapist is she and we can text each other, we can email one another. She's very much like available to me 24 hours. So I definitely utilize that as far as my like treatment plan now.
And if you slip on any aspect of your sort of recovery program, if you will, do you feel like the repercussions of that pretty immediately?
I think I would if I were to slip. So far post-treatment, I've stayed sober, which I'm really happy about. But yeah, what they told me to do at Camden Center, which I did, and I took with me, have a list of people that you can call if you are to have a relapse of some kind. Have a list already ready to go of individuals, and truly go down the list until somebody answers the phone, is what I was told. I haven't had to utilize that list, but I have it, and it's about 15 people on there of, if I'm just in a jam where things are really bad again, I would just go down that list calling until somebody answered.
I love that. And sometimes it's just a matter of having the tools in the toolkit, whether or not you utilize them. I think that can be so comforting. I have just like a running Google Doc that I just continue adding little tools to it. If I think of like, oh, you know what, that's a friend I can reach out to, or you know what, this article really inspired me when I read it, so I'm going to throw that in the document. And I would suggest that for anybody listening, if you're a pen and paper type of person, I think Google Docs can be like very helpful for just sort of keeping it all in one place and having your program right in front of your eyes and easily accessible.
Yep. And that's great to keep quotes. I have in my notes, I have an entire shitload of quotes that I've got that just speaking to people, reading books, but it's so helpful when I do have some times that are dark to be able to go back and look at those quotes. I love being able to do that.
Do you have any resources that you would point people to that have been useful for you?
I would say AA or Refuge Recovery. If you're not into the whole 12-step program, which I totally get, I don't know even that I'm sold on it, but I go because there's a sense of community that I like. But Refuge Recovery is another one that is, it's modeled after the 12-step program, but it's a lot more based in Buddhism, and there is meditation that's a part of it. I really, really like it. That could work for some. And then I would just say keeping up on reading. There's a lot of great books out there that one that I'll say is The Body Keeps the Score is a great read. And if you can ask anyone, whether it's friends, family, therapists, ask for some books in the field of where your trauma or where your mental health disorder is based in. And I found that reading is it's a really great way to, like how you and I are talking right now, you will glean things from it that you find yourself nodding your head being like, yep, that's exactly how I feel. Yep, that's something that I did. There's a lot of common ground that you can find through reading.
I've heard so many good things about The Body Keeps the Score. I have to check out this book. So many people swear by it. Okay.
Yes, it's so great.
Oh, I'm excited. I'll download it on Audible. And then lastly, if you have advice that you would give to somebody who suspects that they might be struggling with some mental health challenges, but maybe lives in an environment that either denies the reality of those challenges, or maybe just somebody who doesn't have access to mental health, to therapy, direct one-on-one therapy, or those aspects of mental health.
Yeah. No, I almost felt like I was going to cry then, because like it makes me so sad to think of that. I had such a different experience with it, in that my parents were so understanding. So it's hard to think about people that don't have that. I feel for them. I would say it's so simple, but it's so hard. You have to be brave. You have to be brave and dig deep and ask for the help that's needed to whoever will listen to you. It may feel that you've got broken record syndrome going on, but you and your life are worth fighting for. And yeah, it's just be brave is what I have to say. You have to do it because your life depends on it. And if you're in an environment where it's frowned upon, or it's just not supportive of therapy, there's so many community resources that you can go to utilize, that I would say reach out. Again, AA, Refuge Recovery, there's just so many free programs that are out there. Is get on Google immediately and utilize that. It might be hard because it's going to be strangers probably that you're talking to, but I am a living testament to the fact that letting these strangers in it releases so much of the negativity that's bottled up. And like where things used to be so dark, and where color, like it was colorless in your life, I promise that like colors will be bright again, and that they'll come back if you are able to ask for help.
I got chills. I have chills right now. Oh my God. Thank you so much for sharing that. That is, wow, that needed to be said. I so appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with such vulnerability and such openness. You have such important things to say, and I am confident that you've helped so many people. So thank you.
So just even if it's one that could nod along with something that I said, then my job is done.
Thanks, Audrey.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about this. I love what you're doing, and love you very much. And this was great. I loved it.
Love you too. Can't wait to see you in person soon. Bye.